Monday, everybody, and welcome back to the Couchside Judges. I'm Scott Fontana. Follow me on Twitter at Scott_Fontana.
And I'm Dan Urban. Follow me at the Dan Urban. Follow the podcast at Couchside Judges, and subscribe to us wherever you listen.
And it's about time. Get on that 5-star review, my friends.
And as always, we talk judging MMA. Head on over to abcboxing.com. Read that criteria.
Yeah, that criteria. Once again, we still have not chased down the ABC officials that we every week goes by now, and I keep trying to. And we just so happen to have on the impetus for why we really need to get this done is our good friend and our guest judge this week, none other than Dan Tom. Dan, thank you very much for joining us this week. How you doing, man?
Guest judge, that sounds like a heavy distinction, but I'll take it. I'll take it from you guys. No, it's good. It's great to be here, man. I love your guys' show. Obviously, you guys are fighting the good fight, and for people that don't know, you guys are people who I look to and reference and would talk to anyway. So to be able to actually do it on your show is pretty cool.
That we really appreciate all of that, of course. And Dan, you keep yourself super busy. You've got your hands on a lot of pots. It's not even just what you do in terms of media, but you're kind of all over the place when it comes to mixed martial arts. Just kind of plug everything that's going on with you, man.
Shoot, man. Yeah, I do analyst work in the media space, and obviously there's a lot of different beats, but the criteria that the show you guys talk about and to kick off this show in the beginning every week, it kind of ties into all of our beats. Even if we don't have a beat, even if we're just a fan trying to understand or a degenerate gambler trying to bet, I think that there's no street that it doesn't really intersect, right? If it's like a grid, all streets intersect, and so does mine. But yeah, I feel like Scott said, I'm on a bunch of different streets, which is really bad for my ADD. I like to focus a bit, but I've been talked in. I just when I thought I was out, guys, they pulled me back in to compete and doing this Train Ultra program here, which is great. It's gotten me back into the gym, Extreme Couture. But speaking of criteria, it's making me realize how unfriendly my style and my biases are toward criteria. So especially when, in an amateur setting, which is still based off the same criteria that this here show focuses on touts. Of course, amateur shows a lot of times smaller cage, shorter round. So if you're a guy who likes to fight on the outside counter, work the body, take it to the ground, but slow cook while you're there, you don't really got the time and stuff to do so. So a little bit of a tangent there. Yeah. But it all intersects though, right? It all kind of intersects back to this year criteria. So you guys tout it for a good reason.
Sure. But you do so many things. You work with so many different outlets. You do stuff with MMA Junkie, of course. What other projects you want to kind of plug while you're here? This is your chance to do it.
Oh, thanks. No. Just basically right now, guys, really just focusing on, always trying to do a good job with my analysis as much as I can. You really can't predict this crazy sport. I do dabble in the betting side of things. So I will be, you may hear me talk about that, especially when it comes to just, acknowledging biases and stuff. Props to my guy Dan Urban over here. I know, you're always very transparent about your bets, but as you guys have been getting, much more serious and really taking steps that I commend you guys for. I know that kind of gets tricky, so I do dabble with that. But again, I do feel like even though that is one of my beats, I feel like understanding this stuff helps. And yeah, man. But right now it's mainly just focusing on my analysis. Of course, my podcast where I do these bets, the Protect Your Neck podcast, and just preparing myself, man. It's so weird. Like it's kind of taken back over my mind. Getting back into competition. For those who don't know, listeners of the Couchside Judges, I've fought once before, only once. I got beat up for 3 rounds by Marvin Eastman's son, if you remember that name.
And Marvin Eastman, not his son.
Yeah. His son doesn't even have his same name. It's like Bustier Nefarios. I don't know. I don't know how the name.
You used to know works. It, and then he beat it out of you.
Yeah, well, no, I know, and other people know it too. It was funny. I was having I was talking with I guess now one of the UFC ring announcers, Justin Bernard, who's doing it for Dana White Contender Series. he actually ring announces for the amateur organization out here that I'm going to fight for and have fought for before. And I was telling him, and I was like, oh yeah, I fought Marvin Eastman's son. He's like, you fought Boost? Because thankfully he went on to become like the champion of that organization, because that's what you want, right? If you're going to lose to somebody, you're going to root for that person every time after. You're like, I want that person to do good, because it'll just make me feel just a little bit better for getting beat up.
You can always say that, hey, I might have been the second best guy there. No one can prove you otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Shouts to my buddy Rodney James. He had to take an L, unfortunately, to Josh Quinlan, who recently fought just a UFC card ago, right? So I cornered him for that fight, and that was Quinlan's MMA debut, even as an amateur. And after that, my guy Rodney messaged me, and he was like, "Holy smokes!" Then I'm like, "Hey, man, you know what? This is exactly what you want. If you're gonna lose to a guy, you want that guy to get to the UFC and look like a killer. You know what I'm saying? Like, at least that's how you're gonna be. I don't know. Yeah. Silver lining, right, guys?
Yeah.
Sure. Dan likes to Dan Urban here, because this is gonna drive me nuts when I go with two Dans here. Our host Dan, normal host Dan, likes to tell the story of when he played youth football. And what was the interaction you and Greg Olson, former NFL tight end, had?
Probably Hall of Famer, right? Greg Olson?
I mean, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer, but I'm a Panthers fan and I love him forever.
I'm gonna say he's a Hall of Famer.
That's fine. We can go with that,
for some reason they put me on the middle row of kickoff return. For some reason, no reason. I wasn't fast. I never got the ball before. Well, the ball found me, and I look up, and this monster kid at like 10 years old is running straight at me. I said, I'm not picking it up.
Oh my God.
I'll let someone else pick it up and take the punishment.
I don't need to be a hero today.
Yeah,
you were so close to being a pro football player too.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's great. Oh, that's great. You trace that crossover. That is great.
Listen. It's fun to shoot the stuff, of course, but we have a lot to get into. It's not so many rounds, but like, oh my goodness. How long before you guys kind of came down from the high of watching that kick that Leon Edwards planted on Kamaru Usman's chin and put him out? Like, that was wild, right? Like, I'm still not over it.
Yeah, I was starting to zone out because I had a big day at the pool. I was really tired, and I was just on the couch kind of zoning out in round 5. And I'm like, then all of a sudden, the head kick, and out goes Usman. I'm like, did that just happen?
So you were zoning out in a way that maybe Dean Thomas was describing about Leon.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, wow. Usman's doing Usman's thing, and then all of a sudden he was knocked out cold. And I was shocked. I sat in the couch for like 45 minutes before I got up and did anything.
Well, I mean, I wish I could have done something like that, but I had to immediately write. I'm like, oh my God, I got to write something about this. Cause like I like banged out a column right away. I forget what time the actual kick happened on East Coast, but I mean, I was done writing by like 2:10, and it got up somewhere shortly thereafter on the web. And yeah, I mean, I was like, everyone's processing it their own way, right? But I'm sitting there, I'm like, I can barely process this. I'm like still trying to react and write to it. And I do feel like I actually, now to my horror a little bit, I actually thought it was one of my better columns, so I was pretty proud of that one.
All right.
You turned it around really fast. I got to say, I was really impressed, Scott. I was like, I was sitting there having trouble, like trying to do my recap podcast. And I'm like, I probably was where, Dan Urban was. I was just kind of zoning out. I mean, you want to talk about like Leon. I was like Leon Edwards, like Dean Thomas said, because he said, Leon wasn't making eye contact, and that's a way of, breaking concentration. I wasn't even making eye contact with my screen. I don't even know what I was looking at. And I just looked up, and I saw, because we'll talk, I'm sure we'll talk about this. When I was looking up, they were against the fence wrestling. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. We've seen this. This fight's going to be over. I look down, and when I look up again, Usman's on the floor. I'm like, how'd that happen? And what made it extra weird was even Rogan admitted it. He just was kind of like he was in disbelief. He had his tinfoil hat on. He's like, he didn't even react to it properly. And it made it weirder for me, who was like, okay, there should have been like an O or something like from Rogan. Like, it was just strange. It took me a while to process it. I still think I am processing the card right now.
I think we all are too. I mean, realistically, obviously while we process this we're kind of prisoners of a moment to some degree here. But when I ask this question, I'm curious where you guys are at right now. I think I know where I'm at right now, but we'll start with our guest, Dan. Is this an all-time mixed martial arts moment? This kick, this comeback, this way to become the champion? Yes or no?
Yes. Is it the all-time? I'm not going to weigh in on that. I feel that's where the
That's
recency
a
bias
hard one,
heavily
right?
weighs
I'm
in.
not even
Yes.
going there, but
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I mean,
But
does this
is it an
rank? Is this
all-time?
on the
Yes.
list?
Yeah, from a technical nerd perspective, even when you take out the context, it was a beautiful kick, southpaw double attack, clean. And then you add in the context for a title coming from behind. That definitely helps it, sure.
In the
And
final
I won't
minute.
deny those things. Yeah, I won't deny any of those things. I'm not going to argue about rankings, but I won't deny it as all time, sure.
Yeah, it's always hard to place those things. What about you, Dan?
Yeah,
Dan Urban.
of course. This is definitely an all-time moment for sure. I mean, what I take most, the slow motion of the sweat just being sprayed about is a image that's going to be burned into my head for two Usman moments.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, back-to-back years in which you could possibly say Kamaru Usman was part of the knockout of the year in a welterweight championship fight. It's pretty wild. Last year, that was my knockout of the year. That was absolutely my knockout of the year. Him knocking out Jorge Masvidal, because I think I had said at the time, like literally the only way he could really get a win per se out of the situation of fighting Masvidal again was to top it, and to top it, he needed to knock him out. And he did so, and he did it spectacularly. It was absolutely marvelous. And so he did everything he needed to. But obviously here, he was a minute away from winning again. And all of a sudden, the guy that, it's not that I don't think everybody wrote him off like crazy during fight week. We've seen, I think, fighters who've even challenged Usman be written off to a greater degree than Leon Edwards was. There were people giving him a chance, right? Like, but by minute 25, when we're starting to get to the point where DC and Rogan and all these and Dean Thomas again, and I don't mean to pick on Dean. You know, Dean was very self-deprecating, which I really, you know what, shout to him, because he was hilarious on social media thereafter. But I mean, literally everybody had written it off except for, of course, John Anik in the very moment before it happened. That was impressive. Yeah. That's another impressive thing about Anik. Yeah, he really is just the best at what he does. It's going to be a long time before I think we get somebody that can meet the bar that he is setting. And I don't think that's a slight on everyone else who's trying to do it. I think it's just we're seeing somebody who's raising what we expect out of mixed martial arts commentary.
Yeah, I think Anik does it. Anik's the man. We're lucky to have him, and he's great. But I think what that was kind of what he always does, and it was just highlighted because of the moment. There are so many times, and for example, when it comes to trying to politely correct his colleagues without correcting them, because he's always respectful and he's always very humble and non-selfish, as you should be in the play-by-play role, right? You're kind of spiking the volleyball up for your color commentators, especially when they're ex-champions, to look good. But as we know, they can kind of run wild with some things, right? With their narratives, especially when you have Rogan and DC, right?
Not those guys.
And I'm not trying to pile onto that whole thing, but just to tie it back to this compliment on Anik, and what you notice Anik will do is one of his best comments. And I remember like tweeting something to this effect, and even like Zach Candido gave it a like. So I was like, okay, well, his own producer liked it, so I guess I'm onto something. But Anik will really balance out that narrative, to where even if he knows they're kind of saying something, even if it's, let's just be honest, wrong, he will politely kind of interject. He's like, well, there's da, right? And he has, it's very artful. It's very tactful. And that's what he was doing there. And Leon proved him right. And it was just kind of a perfect chemistry, if that makes sense, guys.
It really was. And that's something that John Anik has been on this show before, and I'm pretty sure he actually kind of said something to that effect when he was on with us. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. Does that sound right?
Possibly. I mean,
if he didn't say it on our show, he said it elsewhere, and I think he said it a few times. So yeah, I think not only are you positing something, I think this is something that's rooted in stuff he said as well.
Nice, cool.
Dan Tom. So yeah, I think we're absolutely hitting the nail on it. But of course, get back to Leon Edwards here. Yeah, I think we all agree. This, for me, if we're talking about this being an all-time MMA moment, obviously it's the UFC. We think, okay, we've all been to UFC shows. We know what they do. They show the Baba O'Reilly montage. Is this going to be part of the Baba O'Reilly montage for years to come? And I think it's a hard yes, right?
100%.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's got to be. So I think that's really when I think of like an all-time moment. And granted, that doesn't have to be the be-all end-all. It's still one promotion's thing, but I
Right.
think it's got to be there, right? We obviously start thinking ahead now. It's like, okay, Edwards got the win. I think it's no secret that this will probably end up being an immediate rematch into a trilogy, right? Do you feel better? And we'll start with Dan Urban this time. Do you feel better about Edwards' chances of winning in the trilogy fight now than you did about him winning the rematch? Like, did your feelings on how he can handle Usman next time improve, or do you feel like they've gone down? Because obviously he was losing this fight.
He was losing it pretty badly. At least lopsided, in my opinion.
On the cards, sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Edwards went into this fight knowing he'd have to beat him twice. So maybe he's been prepared for this. But I also have visions of GSP Serra too, where GSP just comes back with a crazy vengeance and murders Matt Serra. And then does Kamaru relive that for us? I don't know. That's where that might happen.
I feel like at least on that tiff, like Matt Serra, and this is going to sound like a slight at Matt Serra. It's not intended to be, but it's probably going to come out that way. GSP was always better than Matt Serra. He just always was. Like he lost that fight, and there's no flukiness about it. Like what Matt Serra did was something he meant to do and accomplished doing. But GSP was the better fighter, and I think he proved that next time.
But that's kind of similar here too.
I feel differently here though. Because yes, like granted, I think over 24 minutes, we saw who was the better fighter that night. We also had a first fight that happened, and we saw who was the better fighter over 15 minutes. And both times that was Kamaru Usman. But here, you at least saw reasonable success, that replicable success from Leon Edwards. Stuff that he's doing, you could see him doing again. Having said that, I don't know that I would feel more confident in Leon Edwards' ability to beat Kamaru Usman now that we've seen how he would do, because I mean, just getting that shot off, like granted, he's reading tendencies, he even spoke about it. He said he's a boxer. I know if I could get him to kind of lean in, and like Dan, our guest Dan Tom here said, basically it's the southpaw combo there, right? That was what worked. But is it going to continue to work? I mean, is he going to have months to kind of work on this? I don't know. Other than that, I feel like the better fighter was definitely Kamaru Usman over that fight. So I don't know. I almost feel more confident in Kamaru Usman winning next time. But not that I'm writing off the champion now. What about you, our guest here, Dan?
Dan is the analyst guy. He's good at good at the
he's gonna lap us in this, because this is his realm.
I don't even know about that, because man, rematches are like drive me crazy. We've been getting so many of them. They're my least favorite to write as a writer, and they're my least favorite to analyze as an analyzer, if you want to even call it that, right? So I can't even butt my chest here, guys. I picked Usman, for example, for this fight, and because he's the more probable guy to win, but there's probably a reason why I didn't bet this fight and I stayed away, just because this is, and I hate saying this, and I rarely do this. I like to show the work, right? I hate to go off my gut feeling, but this is just one of those where I had a gut feeling where, like, if Edwards wins, would it be the craziest thing in the world? And as jaw dropping as it was, it's still not crazy that Kamaru Usman lost, at least for me. And people might call me a hater, but I think part of the reason why the all-time talk and all this is because he is generally regarded as the pound-for-pound number one. I do think he's a pound-for-pound great, as far as actively. It's not popular. I've always said Volkanovski more, which is I've only looked more and more right since I've said that. But anyways, neither here nor there. No, but the point is, it's not crazy if this guy loses. That being said, I and the odds makers are still going to favor them for the trilogy fight when they put it together, guys. So that being said, I believe that he won't be as big of a favorite, but I still feel like he's going to be a fairly moderate favorite. So you can kind of interpret that. You can say, well, no, Edwards has a better chance, as he should. We saw that it can happen, so he should have a better chance. But you can still also say, and make the argument that kind of Scott was leaning toward, where Usman, this is really going to be a good reminder for Usman to pressure and wrestle like he did the first fight. Like, not just for that first fight, how he did really for like the first half of his UFC career. Usman was more of a pressure fighter. He's really gotten more into boxing. Maybe he should revert back to that. You guys mentioned GSP earlier. He was able to have his reign, but what did he do? A lot of it was wrestling, right? So maybe we see him try to take a page out of that book.
I'm glad you brought up kind of the wrestling and why he might go back to that, because I'm watching this round 5 again. Like I watched it a few times, especially while I was writing. I just kind of rewound and like had to kind of keep going as I was writing last night. And I'm like, guy, you were leaning on your wrestling a lot. You were getting these takedowns, and I'm granted, Leon Edwards is able to get back up. He spoke a lot about in the lead up to this fight when we spoke. Even he spoke about the fact that, like, yes, he's not necessarily going to be able to keep me down. He might be able to take me down, but he's not going to keep me down. And he was able to pop back up most of the time. But in round 5, he just does way too much standing toe to toe in the middle of the cage with somebody who's a dangerous striker. And I didn't understand why, unless maybe he was just tired from it. I don't know. I mean, this is pure speculation. I don't know anything, but I'm just wondering, why did he go away from a tactic that had essentially given him the fight back after the first couple rounds, which were much more competitive? The judges all gave round 1 to Leon Edwards. I think round 2, obviously it was round 2 through round 4 was all Usman, but I think round 2 was at least a very competitive round. You saw damage being dealt from both men. It was a danger zone. He was winning it, but it was still a danger zone. And then he went away from that for a while, and it was working even better. Then he goes back to it, but he's also not putting up as much pressure like you're talking about. And it's giving Leon Edwards that chance again. So his tactics there were just, I thought they fell apart a little bit at the end. Am I wrong, or what do you guys think?
Obviously it's because the universe was taking what Henry Cejudo had to say into account. That it was easy money, and then the universe was like, oh, you know what? We're just going to put it in Kamaru's head. We're just going to stand the rest of this fight.
That's one way to look at it. What about a more technical analysis of it?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to pin heat on the official here, but didn't Herb Dean kind of separate him away from the fence? Not enough work or something before that? Not long before that finishing sequence. I didn't rewatch it as many times as Scott.
I also wasn't watching wholeheartedly when I had it on. I have it on like on a loop, and I'm like, all right, going back.
Yeah, there is a reset off the cage at some point.
Mm-hmm. I saw some people complain about that too, and I to Scott's point though, like that aside, that could happen. We know refs can get we've heard the broadcast talk about that. They generally get less patient, not more patient as the fight goes on, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of human nature too. So I don't know how much we can pin it on that, because to Scott's point, we've just kind of seen that as a trend from Kamaru, and further, we've seen that as a trend from Whitman fighters, right? With Rose not attacking when she needs to, Gaethje not even just not so much following Oliveira, which was something that some of us could forecast tactically, but even before that, there's complaints like, hey, Gaethje's not as aggressive. He's more of a back foot fighter. He's more willing to kind of be in that back and forth striking instead of pressuring striking, where he kind of initially came in. And same with Kamaru, came in as a pressuring striker, right? Really adding that to his wrestling, and not trying to, conversely blame this on Trevor Whitman, but we've seen that kind of adjustment too. So I don't know if that's now becoming muscle memory, Scott, to what Scott was saying, as far as like you would see him kind of just trigger back into away from what was winning him the fight and into that danger zone.
It was definitely surprising. That was just that was my one takeaway, I think, from the 5th round, other than of course the amazing knockout, because that was that. But like the 4 minutes up to that, it's still he was winning. Like I think he was pretty much going to win that round too. It wasn't a big round regardless, but I don't think you could have pointed to anything Leon Edwards was doing in those first 4 minutes that said, oh, okay, this guy's still in it. This guy's going to win the round. Obviously, we were writing his obituary more or less, right? Mm-hmm. But moving on, obviously we could kind of go deep into this forever, but we've got some other topics we want to get to, especially before we get to our contested rounds. And I really wanted to make sure we give a little bit of attention to Luke Rockhold here, who, of course, he decided to end his mixed martial arts career. He says he is getting old, which kind of hurts me because he's not a year older than me. He's less than a year older than me. So there's that. But I mean, I get it. He definitely looked like an old fighter in there against Paulo Costa, who is very much not an old fighter. I think he was 30, 31 years old, somewhere along those lines. He's, more or less fighting athletic prime there. But still dangerous. He does his FU strikes and all that. It was a wild fight, but looking back on his career, and we'll start with you, Dan Tom. What do you think of when you think of Luke Rockhold as a fighter?
I think of the old Strike Force days, but this is my nostalgia speaking. But as a fighter, yeah, I wasn't sure what to think of him, which is why I probably wasn't picking him coming into this fight, right? Because he was off for 3 years and he didn't look that great. Not even just, up at light heavyweight against Jan Blachowicz, but even before that, So what I thought of him as a fighter was a big question mark. There was obvious the respect and the nostalgia that comes with a resume like a Luke Rockhold, especially for guys like us who have followed the sport, around the times we have, right? So yeah, certainly those things trigger, but I think we got the answer, and more importantly, hopefully we should say, we know how MMA retirements are, right? Hashtag MMA retirements, but hopefully he got the message from it, which was a very identifiable one, man. I know my guy Casey Leiden posted something, and I was just like, I feel that too, man. Again, a guy not far off age of Luke Rockhold. And when they were matching me up, they were like talking about like, why it makes sense and how things balance out. And they were talking about my strengths in comparison to maybe my opponent's possible weaknesses. I was like, okay. And they were like, he's young, you're older. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Okay. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Fudge. Sorry. Don't kill me, Dan Urban. Don't kill me. Don't
worry.
But yeah. Essentially that's what Luke Rockhold kind of was like in the post-fight interview, right? He had that kind of feel. So I think we all felt him there.
Well, Dan Tom's never coming back on the show.
I know. I just lost it.
I'm kidding. Of course, it's okay. That's what we got post editing for. But other Dan, your other Dan this time. Sorry. Maybe I'll trade it off. You guys will be other Dan here and there. What about you? When you think of Luke Rockhold and his career in general too, like what do you think of?
I got like when I think of Luke Rockhold, I remember certain moments where I was like watching Strikeforce when he won the title over Jacare. I remember watching because that's when Showtime had cool events going on, and I remember that. I was like, who is
really
shots fired?
Who is this
shots
guy?
Fired.
Who is this guy that's beating up Jacare right now? And then I remember him one-arm guillotining Michael Bisping from Mao. I'm like, how do you finish from that? And then I remember being in the arena when he absolutely destroyed Machida. And
I didn't get to go to that fight. I was at a wedding. I was at my buddy's wedding. I was in that wedding, actually.
Okay.
So, yeah, I couldn't go to that one, which was disappointing because I'm a big Machida fan for a very long time. I'm not a fan in the sense of like I'm going to fanboy out, but he was my first favorite fighter. So, yeah, to not go to that fight was a little disappointing. Granted, he knocked him out. So, not that I would have been crying on press row, but, shoot, it's still it would have been cool to go.
Yeah. I kind of feel like he was always the guy to rise to the occasion. Like he was always counted out a little bit.
I think that's probably fair to a point because I think, and this kind of lumps in, I think what all you guys said, like you think of Strikeforce. When you think of Luke Rockhold, you think of Strikeforce. And much like all the Strikeforce guys who came in, I would say men and women, but I don't think because the women weren't integrating with other women necessarily. I'm talking specifically about the men who were coming into where other men were. We knew who Ronda was, we knew who Miesha Tate was, but they were fighting the same women. But when the middleweights come over and the light heavyweights and the heavyweights, they come over and the welterweights all the way down. There's a certain degree of, they're not UFC guys, so they're not gonna win. And of course we saw how many Strikeforce guys go on and win championships in the UFC and have really excellent careers. I think when I think of Luke Rockhold, I think of violence, just violence, no matter what, whether he's the one who's giving it or he's the one who's taking it. And with, of course, that very lasting image we have of him just rubbing his bloody nose all over the face of Paulo Costa. I mean, if you needed any one more reminder of what he did, it was violence. It was always violent and bloody and wild. And I mean, this was the first time in the UFC that he went to a decision. And it was still a wild, crazy fight, even when he's resting his hands on his knees like he's a basketball player taking a blow between plays, which, by the way, his father was a professional basketball player too. So maybe he picked up that that move from his dad. So,
Altitude was doing no favors on Saturday.
Yeah, but man, Violence. Absolutely. When I think of Luke Rockhold, I'm going to think of violence. And I will think of the fact that I actually did have a bet on him to lose to Jacare in that fight that you brought up. So I lost money on that one. Yeah, I did. That was with like an offshore book. Honestly, I was kind of glad to lose it because I didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, he was sick of my money.
It was just like I didn't want to deal with them anymore. And then they kept on like chasing me for weeks. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do your service. Take me off your lists. So eventually they left me alone. I forget what it was.
My only random Jacare Rockhold memory was that fight taught me what a Granby roll was, because Rockhold was doing Granby rolls in their little countdown. And as a younger, still active competitor back then, I need to learn how to do that. And I remember once I learned how to do it, I felt so cool. Even though it's a weird move, but I was like, oh yeah, this Rockhold guy is pretty athletic and dynamic and stuff. So not to keep continuing on that, but that's just a random memory. So
well, I'll give you a fun fact before we move on to our final topic here, and that is that the Granby roll is the favorite move of a very surprising fighter who I spoke to recently, and that is Tom Aspinall. That is that he thinks that's like the coolest technique in mixed martial arts.
That makes me like him more. Like I was just telling Oscar Willis, like he seems like a guy that I know it sounds overplayed, and this is not something I would say as much as people might think about the people we cover. But Aspinall is a genuine guy. I just would love to have a beer with, man.
He does seem like he'd be that type.
Speak, like minus 2,000. He's a cool dude to have a beer with. You know what I'm saying? Like you're probably working with pretty good odds there. I'm just saying.
Probably, and he can have a few more of them lately while he recovers.
Yeah.
So just head on out to. I think he's in the Manchester area, if I'm not mistaken. Just fly on out and just see if you can catch him in the pub.
Yeah. After this whole fighting business, I'm gonna catch up on a lot of beers.
There you go.
A lot.
Nice.
But again, our last topic here before we get into our contested rounds is of course Jose Aldo, and I hate to like go to losing fighters necessarily because obviously he lost, Rockhold lost, but
yeah,
and there's obviously big stuff off of Merab, but we just don't have enough time to go into everything, right? So I'd like to focus here on the legend Jose Aldo, because where does this loss really leave him, his career, the fact that he's been trying to push for that second title? Dan Erdman, what do you think?
I think it's clear. You gotta give him Cruz now. Cruz Aldo.
Okay, so you don't even care about the fact that
no.
I mean, you're not interested in his potential title push. You just wanted to serve your own means.
Do this right now before you lose out on it.
Okay. Well, I will say that I completely agree with you in the sense that I really want that fight very badly, and I want it in a blue cage with a blue canvas, and I want Joe Martinez to be announcing for it. And I want all that stuff. I want everything. And Brittany Palmer has to be cage side holding up the cards, no matter what. She has to be there. I'm with you, but man, I just feel disappointed for the guy. Like he was trying to make that last push, and he got really close, but he just wasn't there. Like it really wasn't in him. He didn't have 3 full rounds of competition in him to be able to push, and against the machine Merab Dvalishvili, even if he stops all the takedowns, obviously he wasn't winning that fight, unfortunately. So yeah, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially for someone who has a lot of respect for Jose Aldo. But you try not to have horses in the race if you're covering the sport. I spoke to Merab for the Post actually recently, and he was wonderful to talk to. You could tell that he was trying not to treat it as like just another fight, but also he couldn't even help himself. And he said, like, sometimes I think to myself, this is crazy. I'm fighting Jose Aldo. It's like, yeah, he fanboyed out a little bit too. So you kind of respect that. He seems like a fun dude. What about you? You're the other Dan now this time, Dan Tom. What do you think of this whole kind of, where does this leave Jose Aldo?
It's tough because I was going to say, title picture stuff, because that's the position he put himself in. But boy, did he not fight like it, right? And, maybe he definitely didn't have 3 rounds, but maybe he didn't have the 2 rounds. Maybe he did. I don't think it'll interfere with what we're going to talk about later, but I just feel like his corner really did him a disservice there. I will say that, as far as I think there's a really good example of high level corners, even respected ones like Dede Pederneiras, who's been around the game. You can really look at that. Yeah, you look at that Home Vieira fight where he literally, disowned his own fighter between round 4 and 5 in a fight they were winning because he didn't understand the criteria. He thinks they lost, they won. This fight, he thinks they won, they lost. So that's really tough. And so because of that, regardless of who you want to put the blame, I'm more in Dan Urban's camp. Let's have the fun fights versus Cruz. Though I will say I was more of a Cruz versus Edgar guy because I've been on record of calling for that fight since 2015. So that was my bold prediction. We were going to see it in 2016 and 2015. So for me, I would love to see that. And then who are we going to give, Cruz? That's the question they just pitched you on this podcast, Dan. Well, my wild card is here. Didn't Cub Swanson say he's dropping down to 135? And I will add, even though I hate rematches and I'm pitching yet another rematch, let's be honest, that fight happened in WEC and it was really quick. It was the opening flying knee that took Cub out, right? And
that was on the first WEC card I ever watched live.
Oh, great. Yeah, the SoCal tattoos and everything. And what really pissed me off, guys, especially in hindsight, I don't know if it was public or not because we interviewed Cub on MMA Junkie Radio and he had a good relationship with the guys. So I don't know if this was like off interview talk. But essentially, before he took that fight with Brian T. City Ortega, he was on like a nice little winning streak. It was probably Cubs' last winning streak without looking, right, guys? He actually had some momentum, some negotiating power. He was supposed to fight Jose Aldo. That rematch was supposed to be in the works, but they throw Aldo in a needless rematch right away against Max Holloway, the guy that got brutalized. Remember, it was kind of a short notice in Detroit, UFC 218. So Aldo goes and gets executed there. Meanwhile, Cub gets off with his head guillotined by Ortega. There goes his win streak, when really you could have paid the respects of legends who, even at that point, guys, that was like 4 years ago, it was improbable for those guys to be on win streaks or even winning more than they lost. And they threw that opportunity away. Make up for it now, down at bantamweight. A decade later, I don't care. Let's do it. Cub Swanson, Jose Aldo.
See, I think I'm of the belief right now that I want Cruz versus Edgar first, because obviously that's like, if you're gonna do it, it's now or never. It literally is now or never. But literally. I also don't believe it will happen. So I'm kind of mentally moving on as much as I would like it. I think I'm accepting the reality that it might just be too quick to get Dominic Cruz back in there 3 months later to fight Frankie Edgar, because why does he want to do it? What's his personal motivation? Does he care about the same things we do? I doubt it. So that's why I'm like, you know what? If we can't have that, fine. Do the other one. Just do the ultimate WEC Super Bowl.
Yes. I want one of them. I'm with you there. I'm with you.
That's where I'm at. So
we'll probably get Ricky Simone.
Yeah.
That's where we'll probably
be just another legend retiring kind of thing, or what?
Yeah.
Or actually, it was Edgar or Faber who beat Ricky Simone, right? I have it backwards in my head.
Faber beat Ricky Simone, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, I mixed myself up for a second. Never mind. But yeah, that's it for our topics. We, Dan, of course, we like to give the kind of the review of how the judges fared in terms of how much they agreed, just as a quick little report. So, Mr. Urban, you want to just kind of go over that real quick?
Yeah, so in the UFC in Salt Lake City, the judges were 21 of 26 unanimous rounds, 80.7%. 2 of those rounds they disagreed on were just between 9s and 8s. So only 3 rounds they disagreed on the winner, technically.
And that's a high percentage too. Anything over like 73 is kind of the natural like order of things where things balance out at especially at the UFC level. It's not much different in other major promotions too. But yeah, typically if you see them get it to 80%, they've had a reasonably good night in terms of just the straight numbers of how much they agree or not agree.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And then in PFL, they were in England.
They were in England on London on Saturday. Obviously it was nighttime over there, but it was afternoon for folks of us over here on the East Coast. And Dan, it was probably Tom, excuse me. It was probably in the morning for you, at least late morning. So I don't know if you guys all caught it, but yeah, Dan, what do you got there?
12 of 15 unanimous rounds for 80%. One of those rounds being a 9-8 split.
So another great showing there. And the judges over there, of course, the vaunted excellent judges that we often see working out of England, the likes of Ben Cartledge, Mark Collette, David Letheby, Daryl Ransom. That was the foursome that worked all those fights. But they actually got pretty lucky. They got a lot of finishes over there. So they had much fewer rounds to have to worry about. It was a lucky break for them.
That's a cool name, Daryl Ransom. Like if they did those old school panning, the old UFCs where they would like show the judge on camera, I expect like whoever Daryl Ransom, I expect him to be holding somebody with like their mouth with his hand over their mouth. Sorry,
he looks very
that was
similar
violent.
to that, except not very. And I'm not trying to insult the man. He's a solid judge. But he definitely seems a little more unassuming, at least when you look at him. Now, could he choke me out in 3 seconds? There's a good chance of it. I'm sure he grapples and he could probably just destroy me. But he is much less. I think you can blend in a little more, is what I'm saying. You know,
does he look like Gary Sinise? I'm 90s movies referencing everybody here.
Not at all.
Ransom. Okay, sorry. The movie Ransom with Mel Gibson. All right, sorry.
I have not seen Ransom. No. I don't know that. I mean, I've heard of it. I've heard of that movie, but I've never saw it myself. But you know what? I know a lot of movies too, but we're not going to go on a movie tangent here. Let's get to contested rounds.
I tried, folks.
That's all right. I love movies. So you do it another time. That's fine. Contested rounds here. We only have 5 rounds to talk about because 21 out of 26 were unanimous here. So kind of a lighter contested round set we've got here, and only one of them was even on the main card. Everyone was in agreement, or you know, it just was actually like pretty solid, easy to judge main card, more or less. And we'll get to the one later, but we have to start with I think this was the fight that probably caused the most uproar on social media at the time. And anytime you get a split card, that's going to happen. But Sean Woodson, who fought Luis Saldana to a split draw. It was 29-27 for Woodson, 29-27 for Saldana, and then a 28-28 as that would go. So rounds 2 and 3 are what we are going over in this particular fight. After there was a round won by Saldana, but a point deducted made it a 9-9 round. So that's where we stand going into round 2. Mr. Urban, would you like to set us up here?
Yeah, also round 1 there's an argument to go 10-8 round 1, but no judge did, so we're not talking about it.
We're not going into that one.
Yeah.
We don't have the time.
Round 2, on the feet, I think it's pretty even. I thought both guys were missing quite a bit, actually. Saldana was countering, going backwards. Woodson was the one going forward, landing some decent straights. Saldana does get a takedown and gets caught in his buggy choke for the better part of 2 minutes. This is a move that's taking over the grappling scene. It doesn't look like anything, but, you know, there's an actual submission there. And I thought he was stuck in it for 2 minutes, which kind of indicates that maybe it wasn't that deep. But I do think it was a solid attack, and I think that wins him the round 10-9.
You know, it may not have been deep. It's hard to say, but also he does adjust for it. You know, he definitely makes an attempt to get away from it after it's already kind of seemingly locked in a little bit to a degree. So I think you have to at least score it as something. This was a viable attack that forced the man to adjust. I think that's why I give that one some points here. It's funny you mentioned the buggy choke too being like kind of this new to the scene, because I didn't know about the buggy choke like at all until, Dan, it was when you and I were in Niagara Falls, and I was watching the Will Brooks against Luis Pena fight, Violent Bob Ross, because Pena is going for the buggy choke. I think more than once, if I recall, but I don't think he had it very strong or deep or anything like that at that point either. I think that was a split decision that went Will Brooks' way anyway, too. But that was the first time I'd heard of it. It's only within the last month. It's the first time I'd ever really been exposed to this particular choke. But yeah, I mean, for all the reasons you outlined here, I feel pretty solid that this is a Woodson round. I didn't think that what Saldana was landing was distinctly more effective in terms of the striking than what I even saw was Woodson landing. I thought Woodson had some pretty solid lands on the feet, and I kind of had him up a little bit going to the ground. And then when we get to the ground here, there's nothing happening from Saldana. This is, at the very least, we're not seeing Saldana in positions that he's choosing to be in. He's not in control of the situation. So yeah, I felt like on the whole, that's a Woodson round. What about you, our guest here, Dan?
Yeah, it was interesting. I saw a colleague of ours who was also at the conference with you guys, Aaron Bronstetter, said that the buggy choke was demonstrated, which was really interesting. So this is tough. It's a close round for me. I might have timestamped it wrong, but I timestamped at 1:33 to the end of the round. We get the buggy choke.
Sounds about right.
But even if it's even if it's at the 2-minute mark, I still don't think it would have affected the way I scored it. Because obviously the takedown doesn't have a lot of impact. I like to credit advancements if they're working towards something, but I think Saldana's barely able to get a strike off and breathe for not even a second, because as soon as he passes, that's when the buggy choke is thrown on there. So obviously that negates any kind of minimal minuscule credit you wanted to give Saldana in the first place is overtaken there. But I still, it's tough because I want to praise officials for whether it's at their conferences that you guys are attending or actually in practice, right? I'm kind of keeping that same energy and crediting a fighter off their back. How many times through how many iterations, right, of fandom and the sport have we complained, oh, Mighty Mouse Johnson, Miguel Torres, or whatever fight you want to throw out there where you thought a fighter may have had an argument for winning off their back, right? So how are we going to then complain if a judge actually credits a fighter for attempting offense off their back, right? So if anybody wants to give Woodson the round based off that, you are not crazy. If anything, part of me praises you, right? But I went Saldana because, again, whether we're talking 133 or 2 minutes, it's less than half of the round. And what's happening in the first half? I feel like there's more than enough to grade as far as damaging strikes in the first half. He starts off with Saldana getting the better of the exchanges with some kicks and some counters in the beginning of the round, but Woodson comes back with some really nice jabs and straights. Now, those are all to the head, and it was funny. People, other analysts like myself who are a fan of Z body work, if you will, Woodson's actually really good at working the body. He almost does it not at all this fight, and it was driving a lot of us crazy, but it might have actually helped him as far as the scorecards go, and the fact that when he was striking, he was making it very clear down the center. These straight shots in round 2 are also snapping Saldana's head back. So again, more ammo for anyone wanting to score this for Woodson. But again, that success is sandwiched in between Saldana's, who I felt was more successful on the feet in the beginning that I just cited. And after those straight jabs, Saldana comes back with some punches. I don't know if Woodson already had this damage and it was fresh, or it was already there and he made it worse. But either way, he's actually making him bleed with some of his own counter right hands, Saldana's, and we're actually seeing visual damage shortly after he scores the takedown. And of course, we're in the buggy choke. And even though I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, so perhaps a lot of you that know me might think, well, Dan's bias should maybe be, he's contrarian, jiu-jitsu, guys off his back. For me, it's tough because even though I'm no connoisseur of this choke, I am familiar with it. And when I was watching it, Saldana looked uncomfortable at points, like he was trying to navigate. The only part that it looked close is Saldana was trying to navigate and escape, but he went the wrong way. And I remember saying it like, no, you don't want to go that way. You're going to make it tighter. And you could see that he felt it go tighter. And that kind of scared him. And then for like the last 45 seconds to a minute, he just kind of sits there. And what upset me, not from a scoring, or I had no dog in the fight. I picked Woodson, if anything. So scoring it for Saldana, I had no dog here, folks, for what it's worth. But I was just upset from like a watching and analytical perspective, because I'm like, you should be elbowing here to score because you got to take down, you got to pass. If you elbow, you can overtake what is a submission attempt that doesn't look to be in. And if you elbow, you can perhaps loosen Woodson's grip, right? And then get yourself out. So the fact that he doesn't even throw an elbow the entire time, not at a strike at all, I mean, he leaves the door open for you to score this justly for Woodson. But I went with the more damaging strikes in the first half of the round, albeit slightly 10-9 Saldana here.
It's funny, you make a really compelling argument for Woodson while you say it's Saldana. That's the funny thing, I feel like, because you're saying that he has to account for this choke, right? And the fact that he kind of adjusts, he goes the wrong way. He actually puts himself in a more damaging position. Now, granted, he put himself there, is what you're saying, but the damage is there. That to me says that you really have to give some real weight to this more immediately impactful thing here. This is you could argue, if you think he's putting himself into more danger, that this could be one of the highest spots of the round in terms of fight ending potential.
It's hard to tell. He definitely was the closest to ending the fight because we don't know how close it was.
Sure.
I was definitely upset with his defense, but what was Saldana doing? He was giving the thumbs up, showing that he was okay.
At the very end,
which is
he's
not
been in this for like a minute and 20 at this point.
No, he had the thumbs up for a while. It was actually kind of annoying me because that's why I was saying elbow. I'm like, dude, if you got enough to tell the ref you're okay, and like because it almost seemed like he was only thinking about the visuals as far as scoring goes, what we're talking about. It felt like that was almost in Saldana's head too much in the wrong way. It's like, do some of your own scoring, bro. Don't worry about trying to sell even after the bell rang, he's like, what was that? I don't know what that was. And again, I commend him for the acting job. You have to do what you got to do, or but yeah, he really left the door open for it. So I'm very sympathetic, obviously, to the Woodson score, but the damage that I could see being done, and where the fight took place most of the round, I feel like Saldana did that and got some things to show for that, attacked more areas. And just again, if I got my two arbitrary horses at the carnival race taking a couple paces, it was just a couple paces ahead for Saldana, just in my eyes. That's it. Again, also these buggy chokes, we've seen them. We were just going over some in class the other day, but again, these are also very low percentage things. You know what I'm saying? I mean, even just men's division, and pick a weight class off your back, it doesn't matter. Even the more technical divisions, I'll give you that. We're still talking low percentage. So unless I see something like some frantic wiggling, some like, when the guy's going for the guillotine, he has to give and turn his back and give out of position, and really, if the guy's able to at least stay on top, yeah, he's not doing anything to a frustrating extent, and that pisses me off for multiple reasons to Saldana. But I didn't see the damage or danger, and I could have been wrong. He could have just gone out. We've seen, if you watch past buggy chokes in MMA, guys will just go out and they think they're safe. So again, it's tough to tell. That's why I'm totally okay with crediting Woodson there.
Sure. But obviously, Dan and I are the hosts of this show. We're the ones who our votes count more. It's just the way it is, sir. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, all good.
But we saw it the same way as Derek Cleary, who gave it to Woodson. You were on the majority of the judges' side there, Mike Bell and Rich Montanez. But what does it mean, sir, my compatriot here, Dan Urban, when we are on the same side as the lone judge?
Couchside override. All right.
Guest is not enough. It doesn't think it's high. It's not good. The way it works.
It's all good.
But we appreciate your presence nonetheless. And of course, good. Derek Cleary's prize is in the mail, as they all are. Round 3 here, Dan Urban. What do we have going on?
I thought this was a pretty competitive round, and I also think neither fighter is doing much to pull away. Both seem dead tired. Not much steam on really any of the strikes from either guy. But of the ones that I think land, I think Woodson has a tad more effect. I thought the Travis Brown style elbows helped push it to that direction. So I'm on Woodson 10-9.
Yeah, I'm with you. Honestly, I don't even have a ton to add to this one. I think a large percentage of people would give this round to Woodson, although I don't think it's crazy to go the other way whatsoever. It's just I really just don't have a ton to add. I'm with you, sir. That's a Woodson round. What about you, Mr. Tom?
All you really got to do to score the round is watch the first 2 minutes, because literally it's all slop landed in the last 3 minutes of this round. No one lands anything good quality, but I give it to Woodson because it's largely his straights versus Saldana's kicks, but there was more straights / more cleaner straights landed than Saldana's kicks. So I go Woodson.
And we're of course looking for the greater effect there. And yeah, I think probably in round 3, when we're not seeing the same degree of effect on the legs, toward ending the fight by round 3 compared to the straight punches, you got to start weighing it. I feel like probably in that direction. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody who thinks they disagree.
I don't hate that.
But yeah, so all of us are on the same page here, same as judges Bell and Cleary. It was the local judge Montanez who gave this one to Saldana, which is why we ended up with, again, very disparate scores here, 29-27, 29-27, but on opposite ends, and a 28-28. It's always weird the way it works because of that lost point, but it is the way it is. We have a split draw. I don't hate it. I really don't. But I do think it would have been a more prudent score, at least in my opinion. Like we said, couchside override. So, hey, close rounds like this, it's always tough. And nobody likes a draw, as the crowd let everybody know that we don't like it when nobody wins. Make sure somebody wins.
Yeah, this isn't soccer.
A lot of booze. Yeah, exactly. A lot of kicking though, still kicking. But you can't use your head. That's the other thing. Moving on to our next, and this is a majority decision. So this isn't, again, we've got kind of some unorthodox finishes here. Usually we get, split decision victory, decision victory. Last few weeks, we've had a bunch of all sorts of stuff, right? So now we have a majority decision victory for Marcin Tybura over Alexander Romanov, stymieing the prospect's rise here. 29-28 twice and a 28-28. We're talking about a round one in which there is a potential 10-8. That's what we're here to determine. Dan, what happened?
Yeah, it's
Dan
a
Urban.
it's
Damn
a
it.
total shutout. Total shutout here. Romanov's having his way with Tybura in the grappling department, picking up, slamming him, dare I say ragdolling him a little bit. I will say this, it's not the most damaging round, but I think it's total domination. I think Romanov is outclassing Tybura in this round. He couldn't do anything from the bottom. What pushes it to a 10-8 for me, it's that final minute where Romanov seems to actually start pushing for a finish. He's landed some good strikes, a lot of them. The thing is, I understand, maybe the damage isn't all that high, but I think it's there enough, along with solid dominance, solid duration. I think we go 10-8.
I'm with you. I think this is a round that really ought to be a 10-8 for all the reasons you outlined. I mean, by the scores, by the criteria as written, of course, that this is a viable 10-8, can consider, and it certainly seemed like a round that ought to be different from the other two rounds that we ended up seeing. I get really disappointed when I think the criteria actually fails to get to the fact that maybe we don't actually have the right winner based on, what we all saw. It's just the nature of the criteria being what it is, where they push judges, especially the ABC with the guidelines that they put out, their little training, training document that they released at the ABC conference when I was there, specifically saying 95% of rounds should be a 10-9. And that is kind of where the data had fallen more or less anyway, at least since we started to see that decrease again in 10-8s after the infamous Jan versus Izzy fight, round 5, that I reference all the time on this show. But you watch those other two rounds of this fight. You watch Tybura take control, and he wins rounds 2 and 3 because Romanov's fading, right? But are those two rounds distinctly more than what Romanov was able to do in that round 1, where he absolutely crushed him for 5 minutes? And realistically, if it won't just stop the fight, because you have to take a break, realistically, he could probably still continue to ride out this position and potentially win. That's the way it is. That's the way fighting goes in the sport. We've designated 5-minute rounds. But man, I just want to see more liberal use of 10-8s and 7s, and not because judges are allowed to do it right now. I get that they're not. I'm not saying that they need to start changing what they're doing, but I really want to see regulators start looking more into how we can widen the 10-8 and the 10-7 definitions to get more rounds, not be the 95% of the 5, of 10-9 rounds. It doesn't get the results to always match what we actually watched a fight. So that's why I get disappointed. But having said that, I think you still can, based on the written criteria as it is, go for a 10-8 here. But I know that that's not the norm. They're looking for high damage now. They really want damage to be one of those two. And yeah, so I'm not surprised that it's a 10-9-8 split here, and that actually the majority went 9. That was Sal D'Amato and Mike Bell. It was Derek Cleary who saw this one as a 10-8. So I'm not surprised it went that way, but I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed. That's the same thing that you kind of hear. Maybe your parents said it to you, or maybe mine did. I don't know.
Right.
What about you, Dan Tom? Where are you at with this round?
Well, it's an interesting one. Just to touch on your disappointment, I will say that too, because I think it's also a great solve for the entertainment factor, because you are giving fighters an incentive as well, because it also helps the fairness factor, because they are incentivized, in a perfect world, because it's fair that you're going to know that, okay, if I go for the finish, especially if I'm at high elevation, I'm a heavyweight or whatever, it doesn't matter the context, I go for it and I lay it on my opponent to get them a bagel, as John Anik says, in the significant strikes department, where 437 or 430 on, it's all Romanov. You should be rewarded for that. This guy, especially at heavyweight, if we talk literal context, if a guy gets a 10-8 and doesn't get the finish, he's probably not going to see the final bell. Romanov's lucky to have seen the bell, so it might not even matter. God damn it! Let's reward them when they go for it, and they can check some boxes in the criteria, right? Because under the criteria, I agree. Obviously, you get the dominance and the duration. It's the damage is the most important. That's what we're looking at here. And I said on my podcast before I went back to watch it, which I did for this podcast, because I got to come correct here, folks. I can't be mailing it in. Not that I do for my show, obviously. I'm just saying I try to come correct as I can.
We
here.
know the ones you mail in.
But honestly, it didn't change that much, guys. I will say this: going back to rewatch it, I was more sympathetic to the 9 because the damage wasn't as much as I remember. And now, keep in mind, folks, full disclosure, I do MMA gambling for part of my beat, and I may or may not have had a Romanov by TKO ticket, right? So maybe I'm willing it in my head, so maybe watching live, I think it's closer, but even soberly, the results are digested. We're doing this for work here. We're sticking to the criteria, folks. I'm going and watching it with an open mind and all that stuff, and sticking to the criteria. And you know what? It's still the same thing I said on my podcast. Not by like a photo finish a hair, but yes, it just barely gets over the line as far as that spectrum of a 10-8, right? As far as clear 10-8 to just barely 10-8, yes, it's obviously more just on the just barely side 10-8, if that makes sense. But referencing your guys' ABC criteria as far as that 95 percentile chart on most are 10-9s, there's also what I like to call the common sense test, guys, which is we can go ahead and let's go ahead and take like 70%, 75% of that gigantic 95% scoring ratio of 10-9 rounds. And in that 75% sample of all the samples they allow, guys, we're taking a whole bunch of scenarios, right? We're putting them on the plate in front of us, right? We've got all those 10-9 scenarios on our plate. Now go ahead and take this Romanov Tybura round 1 that we're dissecting, put it on that same plate. There's no way in heck that it looks like any of those rounds, guys. It doesn't look like any of those 10-9 rounds. They are not the same species.
Yeah.
So for the common sense, it's a clear 10-8. For criteria, we're trying to be sticklers here. We're trying to get on the same page. I still think it hits the 10-8. Not clear as day, but it gets there.
It's like Scott likes to say, it's a different round.
It's a different round. I do like to say that. Yeah, it's just a round that's different really ought to be treated as such, because we've all seen rounds like, I mean, what we're saying here is that this round for Romanov, for all the work he did, is a 10-9, and so is what Carlos Esparza did against Rose Namajunas in their rematch earlier this year. That is also a 10-9. These are the same rounds. These are the same scores. It just doesn't make any sense. But I do not fault the judges. I fault the tools that they are given, and I want them to be given better tools. And I think a lot of them, actually, who I speak to, very often I hear people agree. So I hope one day that will change.
And one thing in defense of the judges and the fight we like to bring in this argument, the Carlos Esparza fight for one end of the spectrum, and we like to say Jan Sterling round 2, right? And we may use this example for the next round we talk about. But I will say, in defense of the judges giving the 10-9, we didn't have the Dan Miragliotta going, you got to show me something, and stepping in. Jason Herzog did get close, but they were for back of the head warnings. They were for fence grabs. There were other reasons on my second watch where that was the reason why the referee kind of got close in there. I saw some visual, the fighting spirit that isn't, not the Modelo fighting spirit, but fighting spirit is in the criteria. And I feel like he was beating this fighting spirit out of Tybura for what it's worth.
Well, we all ended up on the same page here this time. We all have this one as a Romanov 10-8 round. We all saw it the same as Derek Cleary did. So, Dan, what does this mean again for Mr. Cleary?
Couchside override.
Man,
you guys better send him something this time now.
No, we always do. It's in the
Okay.
It's in the mail. I'll be heading down to Georgia soon. We have 2 more rounds here. Probably we don't have to go as deep into these rounds, I feel like, because they're a little less consequential and all that kind of thing, right? But we'll start with Merab Dvalishvili, who got the win over Jose Aldo. This was our only round from the main card, from the pay-per-view card that we're going over. He had 30-27 and 2 29-28s. So that means our round 1 here is where we are split on the winner. Dan, why are we split on the winner? What happened?
Mainly because there's really not much going on this round. So
there's that.
Low output rounds are always, tough to score.
Toughest for the judges, and so are the crazy output rounds.
But Merab's throwing leg kicks. Aldo's checking most of them. The punches from Merab's side are missing. The ones landing in the clinch, I don't think, are that strong. Aldo's not really throwing much of anything back. I mean, he does land a really good leg kick early that spins Merab around. Then he landed a knee to the body as Merab kind of tried to close the distance. And then eventually Merab pushed him against the fence, and this is where he lands those clinch strikes. Aldo lands a solid punch to the body. I think it was a left, and then follows it up with another knee as Merab comes in to close the distance. And then that final 10 seconds, Aldo has a last couple second flurry, but really only connects with his body kick. And I'm on Aldo here. 10-9. I think the body work wins him this round, actually.
What about you, Dan Tom?
It's funny. I was trying to be preemptive and take notes, and all my notes were initially for round 2 because I thought that was going to be the round we'd be talking about, and decided to go back to go round 1. And I thought this was, and by the way, I picked and had a bet on Aldo, but I ultimately scored it live and on rewatch for Merab for what that's worth. So can't accuse me of the bias here.
I appreciate you exposing your potential biases in this situation as a bettor. I personally do appreciate that that's at least out there in full disclosure.
Got to, man. Got to. Again, there are people who, for whatever reason, come to me for information. I try to send them your guys' way, especially for this stuff. So I don't need to pollute your guys' feed as well. But no, that being stated, I do feel that this was a more clear round for Aldo, and both for reasons that you can accuse me for my contrarian biases, but no, more importantly, they all tie to criteria and quite fairly clearly, if you ask me. Now this is a round maybe where Dede Pederneiras could complain about quote unquote stalling against the fence and whatnot as far as the optics go. But yeah, I got round 1. Aldo is checking hard. By the way, you guys want to get upset at stats? Go look at the leg kick stats. They don't list it round by round on Fight Metric, but I believe they credit Merab like 27 out of 31. And I'm like, what? This round alone, there is maybe 2.5 to 3 leg kicks that Merab lands cleanly. The rest are all checked or completely evaded. So I would love to see what kind of homework they're doing. And no offense, Richard Mann, shouts to you, man. The real statisticians out there. I'm just saying, it's maddening. Just go leg check. So yeah, he's actually checking Merab's kicks, landing some hard body jabs here. Merab does land a nice clean kick in the first half of the fight, and then he also lands a nice spin kick later on. But Aldo, every time he lands his most cleanest shots, because Aldo will return with a couple himself. I can't read my own handwriting. I think Dan Urban has a similar problem. You picked up on him before.
So both do. I can read my own. I always could.
I'm gonna kind of abandon my notes, but Merab, there's a lot of stuff that I'm writing here that it looks like he lands, but it doesn't. So maybe it could come down to how you judge things. And I was saying on my podcast that like it's so hard to because there are people arguing about round 2. And I do think it was closer than people credit for, but I ultimately still scored that for Merab. I'm staying on round 1. Don't get me wrong. I'm not getting sidetracked here.
Yeah, we can't get sidetracked.
Yeah. No. I'm bringing just up the fact that a lot of what Merab was throwing to me was, a lot of it wasn't hitting clean or getting checked. And even though I was saying in my podcast, that's where I was getting off at, is that Merab can kind of chin bully and cardio bully because he just doesn't get tired. He doesn't, I was like, these knees could like be breaking the rib, but like you wouldn't know because it's Merab. So even though I credit quality strikes more, I also have to keep my speculation in check, right? If Merab isn't showing damage. But when I went back to watch it, which the judges don't have this luxury, folks, when I went back to watch it, like in these strikes from round 1, we're talking about the relevant round, Merab's like smiling and like doing that thing, and I don't know, to me, I know that's kind of gray. It's not, it's not in the criteria. You can't, score smiling against somebody, right? But like that is probably the only acknowledgement you're ever going to get from a guy like Merab that a strike landed. So for me, I'm like, that's actually pretty good. I don't know. Like, sure. I can't be in the judges' heads. I can't tell them. I think
those are indicators. I think people accept those as,
right?
as general indicators. Not all the time. And I'm sure everything is different, but I don't think you're off base here. I think people look for, especially like, I always think of Carlos Felipe. Whenever he got punched, he was always just like, no, didn't hit me, shake his head. No.
Yeah.
Like, come on, guy. All you're doing is telling them that it actually touched you. That's literally
Yes,
the
yeah.
you ever
That's
did. So
that's where
yeah, I
my
mean,
head
a
goes
little
too.
smile here and there, that I think that's judges can look for that kind of thing. But I'm sure they're looking for many other tells as well. They're looking for heads
Sure.
being snapped back. They're looking for progress being stopped. They're looking for the combo to be abandoned, that kind of thing, resetting, all that stuff. All those things are good indicators, right? And of course, on top of that, the actual physical, what's left on the body in the wake of these type of things, right? So yeah, I also had this one for Aldo. I'll keep it short and sweet. I definitely had it for Aldo. I was like Dan, a little surprised that this was the split round. Also, round two, I figured was going to be a close round. When I heard the cards, I said, okay, maybe that'll be the split round. And you brought up Richard Mann. Richard Mann actually asked me afterward. He said, would based on the criteria, can you justify why round two should be a Marab round? And to keep it very short and sweet, I essentially said that he landed some pretty solid strikes, I think, on the feet early, and he landed a lot of knees in the clinch that, it's hard to really grade those, but I think the places he's landing and the number of them, I don't think you discount these things. They're not pitter patter.
Sure.
When you're landing those
Absolutely.
in the clinch, and I mean, you could speak to it better than probably any of us. Mr. Tom, is like when you're sitting there and you're getting those knees in there, especially if you're in sparring, it's like that's not friendly. That hurts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm Mr. Cumulative guy, right? I'm like Mr. Like, okay, I think I think we can fall a little bit into the media. Let's not forget about the cumulative. So I got to keep that same energy here, right? I got to keep that same energy to what Scott's saying. Like those count for something. And I will say Aldo did kind of give some bad optics. He was like shying away from some at the end of one of those rounds. So not good optics to the knees.
Sure. But so yeah, all three of us on the same page. Jose Aldo, round one. Sal D'Amato, Chris Lee had it that way as well. It was Mike Bell who was the out judge here. Not crazy, but it's okay. Moving on to our final round here. This is another 8-9 split in the Angelosa, right? Angelosa, am I saying that right?
Yep.
Got the win over AJ Fletcher. Unanimous decision, 29-28 twice and a 29-27. So round three, we already know he's won it. He's got it locked up. But to what degree here, Dan? Where are we talking about this as an 8-9?
Well, I mean, Fletcher's dead tired. Another victim of altitude here. And Losha gets on top of him and he just starts teeing off with huge elbows for 30 seconds. Solid damage here this round. But then, I mean, you get the last 3.5 minutes, he's just laying on top of him, throwing body, head pretty much. I think those do add up cumulatively. Fletcher had absolutely no offense. Those two combined, 10-8 for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't have a whole lot to add, to be honest. I think this is a big round by virtue of not a whole lot being done by Fletcher, and he takes a lot of damage. It's if you want damage to have to be one of those Ds, I think you have it here. I actually do. So I'm gonna say 10-8 as well, sir. What about you, Mr. Tom?
I think that if you thought Tabora Romanov round one was a 10-8, I feel like you have an easier time making a case here in short. And the one thing I said that was lacking that I thought was there in the Tabora Romanov was the ref getting in for specifically to perhaps stop it, which should count a lot. That should tell you, go off the ref's cue. They have a better view than even the judges, right? Than us at home. And we had that at about 3:30 the round. The ref actually goes into check in round three. So that puts it over to 10-8 for me. I didn't even think it was going to go to decision. And I had a Luxify decision ticket in my hand. I didn't think it was going to get there. So the fact that I had that thought alone, the ref had that thought alone should have that. But perhaps in the defense, the last thing I'll say on this round is that they're really, the last half of the round is super inactive to where, Elusa was risking getting stood up. It was so inactive. And I wonder if, maybe the referee with the official, the judges with human nature in play, right, guys? Maybe you kind of forget the weight of the first half of the round when you just get a slog the second half. I don't know. Maybe that's why, but I go 10-8.
I'm going to push back a little bit at that idea, because I don't think it's so much that necessarily they forgot so much as you'd like to see more of a push, right? There's kind of we had it explained to us too by officials in the past, and I think one of the fights that was in particular was go all the way back to Amanda Nunes against what was it, Felicia Spencer, Dan? Is that the fight that we had this conversation with one
Oh
time?
yeah.
Where there was like there were a couple lopsided
Yeah.
rounds in there. It was like, well, why shouldn't that be a 10-8 for Amanda Nunes? And I don't think I've gotten the chance to go back and watch it myself and really make decisions. But the idea being, she doesn't necessarily push for the 8 beyond hurting her opponent initially. Now, she kind of coasts to a degree. And I think maybe that's what a judge kind of is looking for. They really want more of that than just like you had that and then you kind of backed off. Now, I do think that we still get to the point here. I feel comfortable being this a 10-8, even in that context. Sal D'Amato, one of the most veteran of judges there is. He's the most hardest working in terms of most UFC assignments in the modern day. He had this one as a 10-8 here, and actually he did not have, if you recall, he did not have a 10-8 in the other round, right? Oh yeah, he had as a 10-9 in Romanov. So he is kind of doing what you said here, Dan Tom, and there's a difference between one round and another. This is the subtle difference here. Maybe it was, we don't know why, we're not in his head, but maybe that was why he ended up going for the 8 here and not the 8 in the other fight. The 9s came from Chris Lee and local judge Dan First. So it didn't, again, ultimately it doesn't matter. This was the deciding round and he definitely got the round. So we're really only talking about semantics here, but we like to see it follow through, right? That's why we talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be on the same side of Sal. That definitely feels great right there. But I will say, I don't know if we had the same visual cue like you said, Scott. But can I just ask you guys? Does that weighs heavier with you guys too, right? When you see the ref kind of coming in and like showing more like concern, does that uptick the whatever the fighter's doing as far as if they're doing a damaging motion? Maybe you don't think it's close to a finish, but the ref maybe moves in, warns the fighter to work. Does that kind of up it in your guys' head?
For me, from my view on TV, I don't know if it would be the same on if I was cage side, but when I see it on TV and he starts moving in closer, it indicates to me that okay, these strikes that he's landing have some good solid pop on them.
I feel like it's a tricky thing, right? Like I would the simple answer is yes, but also every ref acts kind of differently in certain situations, right? There's some refs who are gonna, a good ref, of course, is going to be on top of the action, but maybe they're handling it in such a way that may be just a little bit different than another one does. So it's hard to just go directly off of that unless you know the referee's tendencies and that kind of thing. I imagine the judges who are sitting, the judge refs, they're called regs now. The judges who are sitting cage side, I imagine they can feel the degree of these strikes landing to a higher degree than we can through the television. Obviously, you sat cage side for fights, you've been up there for fights. You know how it feels. It just feels differently. You actually can feel things in the air in a way that you don't if you're watching on television. So I imagine the judges cage side probably aren't leaning on that as much. I'm
sure.
Would love to know the answer if there's any judges who want to clarify that for us. But no, I would think a judge, a real good experienced judge, probably doesn't need it as much, although it can probably be a differentiator. Sure. I don't see why it couldn't be. So I'm curious about that answer. I hope we learned that in the intervening week here. But
it makes sense.
Dan, we're all on the same page here. So we saw it with Sal D'Amato, who was the out judge. What does that mean for Sal?
Couchside override.
We do not get a lot of 3 couchside override episodes. This is a rare, especially when there's only 5 rounds to talk about.
Yeah,
we were more often than not overruling the scores here. But I don't think there was anything. We didn't have any bad ones here. I think even the local judges acquitted themselves here well. I think, and I want to say too, real quick before we move on to our finishes here, I like the way that Utah, the commission, did their assignments, because what they did was they had local referees work the first 3 bouts and then gave way to the traveling referees, Mike Beltran and Jason Herzog and Herb Dean, the rest of the way. So it gave them a little bit of experience early on in the card. And no offense to these fighters, but they're lower on the bout order. Sometimes that's just the way things go. And then, of course, we had a local judge mixed in with traveling judges throughout the prelims. And then after that, it was all the traveling judges. And I thought that was a really, really great way to both get judges experience, but also maybe not relying too much on local judges for what is a major mixed martial arts card on the world stage. So I was really happy with that.
Yeah, no, massive props. I like the way they structured that too. And just the fact that we only had 5 contested rounds, I was telling Dan, I was surprised. I was like, wow, for a crazy card, that many fights, that many decisions,
And that many
massive
rounds.
props.
That
Yeah,
many
and
rounds.
even according to you
26
guys, like
rounds was a
you said
lot.
off the top of the show, 80%'s a good number, you guys said, right? Higher than the
Really
average,
good
right?
number.
That's good.
Especially with that volume there. I think it was a really good night for the judges. And I think, our show, of course, we will highlight good judging, but a lot of places really won't. I think this was an event where realistically we ought to be highlighting good judging. But again, that is it. We're on to the finishes here. There were 5 at the UFC on Saturday. 4 of them were TKOs. 1 was a sub. 3 ended in the first round, and then PFL. I don't know if I was the only one of us three watching this, but I watched part of it. I didn't get to watch every single thing, but I watched a good chunk of it. 9 finishes, 4 by KO or TKO. It's actually 5 by submission. 1 of them was a technical submission, and 6 of these ended in the first round. So a lot of, I think what do they call them, 6 points or whatever. That's their nomenclature in PFL, because you get 6 standing points, even though we're in the playoffs. So whatever. Let's go to our guest here first, Dan. Other than, I think we got to take Leon Edwards out here, because all of us would probably say Leon Edwards if we're being real honest here. Other than Leon Edwards, what was your favorite finish out of all the fights?
We had a lot of decisions, so the finishes wasn't as vast as recent weeks where we've had crazy finishes. But I'll give some love to Albazi because he's been on the shelf for a minute. And man, that's 2 black. But the guy, I'm sure he's not a purple belt anymore, and belts don't mean anything, folks. A lot of people, when they train MMA, stop training jiu-jitsu in the gi or pause it, right? But this guy came in as a purple belt, and he already owns 2 subs over black belts. It's insane. Most recently, of course, Francisco Figueiredo. So I just want to see more of the kid. I hope he can stay healthy.
It was a good choke. Absolutely a good rear naked choke. Mira Bazi, that is the thing. You just want to see him get in there again. I mean, it was almost 2 years, right? I think it was January 2021 was the last time.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see more of him. What about you, Dan Urban?
Tyson Pedro front kick to the body. Just shut down Harry Hunsucker.
It's really unfortunate that the word sucker has to be in his name, because he has had just an awful, awful run in the UFC and its affiliate fights and promotions, if you want to call Dana White Contender Series that. He's 0-4 now. He's got 4 first-round knockout losses. He's just not a UFC caliber heavyweight or light heavyweight fighter. It's just not. And I don't mean to be mean, but I think that's probably the reality that we all live in, right? Don't think it's hard to dispute that. But for me, my favorite finish actually came from the PFL, again, other than Edwards. Came from the PFL with Larissa Pacheco, who introduced Elena Kolesnik to power punches, because apparently she hadn't felt that kind of power really connecting before, because when she got a taste of Pacheco's hands, it was basically just like, I don't want to be a real part of this. And she eventually crumpled and showed that realistically there are definitely levels in the PFL, and it's not just Kayla Harrison and everyone else. It's Kayla Harrison, then Larissa Pacheco, and then I don't know, does everyone else include Julia Budd? I feel like that's probably harsh, but realistically, I mean, there's just levels to this, and Pacheco really showed that. So yeah, that was a good finish. I don't know if you guys got to see it, but
I'm just wondering. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, those divisions can be so tricky. I'm wondering how much longer until everything settles out. Because you think back in the day in the men's divisions, it was a similar problem. Hindsight, if we had hindsight, we would have seen some really bad mismatches that maybe shouldn't have happened in MMA.
Sure.
But these things happen in MMA.
Someone said that once, and I like to say that all the time. Actually, that's a go-to phrase for me.
Gus Johnson.
Indeed. Yeah. Gus Johnson. He was in Madden. He was one of the voices of Madden recently. That was weird.
Yeah, he's one of those voices.
Yeah. No UFC this coming weekend, guys. This is the first time in 3 months where we have no UFC card to look forward to. And honestly, I kind of look forward to that in and of itself. I like these breaks. I really welcome them. I think working in media, especially, it's really just something that can kind of drain on you, because if you're a fan, even if you can call yourself a real fight fan, right? There's going to be weeks where you're just like, come on, sometimes I might just want to do something different. But you don't get to choose that if you are in media, and this is kind of how you make your bones and all that. So I welcome a break like this, and then we're back on again with UFC Paris actually the next week, which actually should be a solid card. We won't talk too deep into that. And I can tell that Mr. Tom here is fading. He's letting out a little bit of a yawn. It's very late. It's 2 a.m. for us on the East Coast. Dan's not even at midnight yet, though. Dan Tom is not even.
No, but he's got training in the morning. He's got a fight to win.
That's we don't want to take too much away from that. So real quick before we wrap up here, let's look to I guess you could call this a major, right? It's a major fight card going on Friday night Eastern time. It's 9 p.m. It is the first one championship card for Amazon Prime subscribers, which is probably a lot of you. Because realistically, at least living where I am, I don't know how people get by without having an Amazon Prime subscription. When you need stuff for your kid, it's just easier to be like, yeah, I need this in like 2 days. And sometimes it's just hard to get your kid to the store. So it's definitely a really good thing. But the fight here, at the very least, is compelling. It's Adriano Moraes going again against Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. It's the rematch for what they call I think they still call it the flyweight belt, but it's the 135-pound belt because they do their whole, anti-weight cutting thing. But when you look at Adriano Moraes, you're like, how is this guy not cutting weight? Because he looks like a whole weight class above Mighty Mouse Johnson, but it is what it is. Is this a fight either of you is going to be watching with excitement?
I like.
I would love to watch it. Yeah,
that was good. I didn't set anybody up. Let's go with you, Dan Tom.
I should be much more into the Asian MMA scene than I am. Just Contender Series, Bellator, and UFC.
Are you stereotyping yourself, sir? What are you doing?
No, man. I love the talents over there. I love DJ as well. I was a defender of him as far as the pound for pound talk back in the day. Because he's just a great example of it as far as MMA being a lighter weight class guy. You can kind of do it all. Obviously he's getting older, so maybe it'll be good that I miss it, and I won't be depressed. But no, I would try to see this. This would be viewing potential for me for sure if I was a fan.
What about you,
Normal
Dan
fan?
Urban?
Yeah, I like DJ. I'm more. I want to see if he. I mean, the first fight was kind of found himself in a position that he probably wasn't used to, where he'd get kneed in the head from the ground. And I think he'd probably be more wise to it this time. I want to see if he makes the adjustments.
Yeah, I'm curious in general. Honestly, Mighty Mouse Johnson being the legend he is, it's hard not to watch him compete because I still think he's got it. I still think he's a great fighter, and I think realistically, you could see him step into the 125-pound division at the UFC level, and you wouldn't count him out to win the championship, no matter who is in front of him. I feel very good about that. I feel very strong about that. But he doesn't seem to mind where he is. He seems pretty happy over there. I think heavily of Adriano Moraes too. I've thought a lot of him for many years, way before Mighty Mouse Johnson was there. So it's nice to see that he is starting to get more recognition, thanks to the rub that he got from beating Mighty Mouse. But yeah, this is a compelling fight. This is definitely a fight I'm looking forward to watching. I can't say I'm enamored of watching one every week. Like, this is one Amazon Prime number one. If Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson is not on Prime number 2, am I watching this? I don't know, but I'm watching this one. It's of course in Singapore, where one's kind of based, and it's also fighting on here 9 p.m. prime time. It's going to be weird time over there. I don't even know what it is. I think it's 9 in the morning or something like that. I want to say it's like a 12-hour difference, if I remember, from June when the UFC was in Singapore.
Yeah.
So yeah, 9 a.m.'s that's a tough call, for especially when you think about the guys who are on the prelims, the men and women who are on the prelims, man. But this is not official unified rules ABC scoring criteria. This is not how they do things. They have their own detailed way that they go into in their website to a certain degree of how they will score these fights. I'll refer you to them if you want to look at it, but it's a little different. And they also score the fight as a whole. So it's different. And what I don't love is the seeming lack of transparency. I mean, shoot, fighters over here don't necessarily know what the judges are looking for. I think we've talked to enough of them and heard from enough of them to know that they don't know. But like, do they even have a chance of knowing if they fight for one? I mean, I don't know. Are they having rules meetings and being like, here's what you want to do and do this? I doubt it. So yeah.
I want to see one go to Saudi Arabia and see how the they just go on that kick I know there's been talk about a lot of the shows
goodness.
and how they're going over there. I'm sorry, I don't want to stir the
no,
pot
we're
anymore, but-
all with the rabbit holes here, sir. You're leading us in the wrong direction. We're trying to
Sorry.
wrap up here. We're trying to wrap up, but yeah, it's a mixed show too. That's the thing. There are Muay Thai bouts on here. There's MMA bouts on here.
That's right.
Yeah,
They sometimes put grappling on there, which I wish they did for this one because I would have liked to tune in for that. They have a decent.
you're not as
grappling
enthused
division.
about the Muay Thai.
I prefer grappling. But they have a decent grappling roster over there that I'd like to see. But they didn't want to put any of them on this event, so.
I think probably if I'm going to play, if I'm going to put myself in their shoes, I bet you they're thinking, well, American audiences don't want to watch the grappling. They would rather watch the Muay Thai. That's what they think. Are they right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not for me to say, but I think that's what they think. That's my 2 cents.
probably.
But I'd watch the grappling. Hell, I love watching the grappling. So that's good for me. I think it's about time to wrap up here. But again, I want to say thank you, and I speak for my co-host Dan here.
For sure.
Thank you very much to Dan Tom for joining us on this episode as a guest judge. I hope you had a really nice time. We had a nice time with you. You're always a good fun time. I had fun on your podcast at the beginning of the year, so now we've kind of come full circle. Now you got to get Dan Urban on your show.
And I gotta get I do. I haven't had a top 5 guest on my show since Scott. Scott left the place a mess. No, I'm just kidding. It's I'm a bad booker, man. I got to get back on it. I've had a top 5 show in the works like for months now. It's been bad, but that was an awesome one that we did. And I got to get you right, whether it's for a recap, a breakdown, or a top 5. If there's a top 5 of anything that's burning in Mr. Urban's heart, we'll get him on the program, man. I love you guys. You guys really do a fine job. I don't recommend you guys for no reason. You guys really are fighting the good fight. And I just really respect what you guys are doing, man. Like I mentioned, Dan earlier, obviously yourself, Scott, like you guys have, that's one thing I don't think they understand about the people that work in the sport, whether it's the media or like you guys know the officials themselves and you guys yourselves. These are real people who really love the sport. In some cases got 9 to 5s or maybe not 9 to 5, some weird hour jobs that kind of jump around. But the point is we make time and dedicate ourselves because we love it. Like, why else would you? Why else would you go learn the criteria? Why would you wake up early and go on a jiu-jitsu mat? Why would you do any of the things that any of us do unless we loved it? So that's something I think we all need to keep in mind and something I definitely respect you guys for.
Well said, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
We respect the hell out of you, like I said, and we'll do this again. We'll absolutely do this again.
For sure.
No, definitely. I love you guys. Keep fighting the good fight. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Dan. And that does it for this episode of the Couchside Judges. Once again, thanks to Dan Tom for joining us. We know we got to let him go. He's got a fight to win. He's got to go train.
Yeah, get some sleep, Dan, and we'll hit you all up next week. We're not going to go over one. We'll figure out something else. Maybe we could go back to some past judgment, Dan.
Yeah, we can do that. We gotta have something, right?
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out a show. So thanks for listening. Have a great week. Enjoy your non-UFC weekend, everybody.
Take care, everyone.